Good morning.
Oh, it's an interesting snapshot, a couple of The Guardian and The Telegraph there, focusing on Rachel Reeves and this ruthlessness that we're told this streak exists in the Prime Minister. Is everyone nervous about that streak, that their job could be gone sooner rather than later within the Cabinet, or not?
Well, I think it's no bad thing to know that your boss is going to take the difficult decisions. And Keir Starmer is someone that I've known for a very long time. He's never shied away from taking difficult decisions, and I think that's what the country needs in a Prime Minister. I
think you're referring towards the necessary spending cuts. What about to people's positions within the Cabinet, like that of the Chancellor?
The Prime Minister is...
Same ruthlessness applies there?
Well, these are judgments for the Prime Minister, but I think that the Chancellor is getting on with doing a very difficult job. We inherited a very difficult economic legacy from the previous government. The budget that took place last autumn was about fixing the fundamentals of our economy. The Chancellor has been in China over the course of the weekend. I think that was the right thing for her to do. She's getting on with doing a difficult job of delivering economic growth for the country.
And is there some... I know taking decisions on the economy, they take time to filter through, but is there some dissatisfaction amongst you and your Cabinet colleagues that the actions haven't kicked into gear yet, that the economy has been tepid, I think it's fair to say?
Well, I don't think anybody thought that this was going to be easy, and I think there is an acknowledgement that the hand that we've been dealt is a difficult one. I think that the Chancellor is doing a good job. She's getting on with fixing the fundamentals of our economy. She's been, as I say, in China just recently. She was criticised for doing that, but I think that was the right place for her to go and the right conversation for her to have. These are difficult international headwinds that we're dealing with at the moment, but I think that she's doing a good job, and I think that the Prime Minister thinks that as well.
Let's talk about what you're announcing today. It relates to ransomware and cyber attacks. Just break down what's new about this announcement.
Yeah. So we've got a situation at the moment where cyber criminals based in places like Russia are quite literally holding public sector organisations, key bits of our national infrastructure, to ransom through the use of ransomware. So we're bringing forward proposals today that will ban payments to these cyber criminals. We're also introducing a payment prevention regime, which will include more transparency about any payments that are made by the private sector. And we're also introducing a mandatory reporting regime. That will mean that the UK is a harder target for the cyber criminals who've been extorting money from our public sector organisations for too long.
I mean, it's really interesting that. So is the suggestion that up until now, whether it's public sector organisations or private, that a lot of British-based companies or individuals have been paying ransoms?
Yes, there is no doubt that a number of different organisations, private sector and public sector, have paid ransoms to cyber criminals, and we want to put a stop to that. We think that that is the wrong approach. There's more transparency that we need around the payments that have been made, and we're looking at what measures we could put in place to ensure that where cyber criminals are operating, whether that's in Russia or elsewhere, they look at the UK as a place to avoid. And I think the measures that we're bringing forward, that we're going to consult on, will contribute to that process.
I doubt you'll name and shame private sector people that have made these payments. Which public sector bodies have made payments to criminals?
Well, we know that a number of public sector authorities have made payments to cyber criminals, but part of the issue here is...
Like what, for example?
Well, there have been a number of hospital trusts that have been targeted, but part of the...
And they've paid up to keep their information safe?
So ransoms have been paid by public sector organisations, but...
By NHS hospital trusts?
But part of the problem here is that we don't have the full picture, which is why we want to introduce the mandatory reporting regime. We think it is the wrong approach for any organisation, whether they are public or private sector, to pay a ransom to a criminal organisation in Russia or elsewhere. Not least because, of course, you can't rely on these people that they will return the data that they have stolen.
I can understand absolutely the rationale for that, but NHS hospital trusts have paid ransoms to keep our data private.
Well, there have been a range of public sector organisations who have paid ransoms to cyber criminals, and we're going to put a stop to that.
Including NHS hospital trusts?
Well, there have been hospitals that have been targeted. And as I say, a range of different organisations have paid ransoms. We think that is the wrong approach. We want the UK to be a hard target for these cyber criminals, and we think that these measures will help us to get to that place.
It's fascinating. I guess in the meantime, until the effect of this to make us look less attractive for worth hacking might be that the data they've collected will be released, private hospital data.
Well,
that's a price that you'd pay in the meantime.
Well, that's
difficult position to be in, I get.
That's the situation at the moment, where we've got very sophisticated hackers in Russia and elsewhere seeking to extort information from a range of different organisations. My advice is not to pay a ransom. We think that that is the wrong approach, but we're going to put measures in place to mean that that will be against the law for public sector organisations to pay a ransom.
And the cost of that in the short term might be that private individuals' data is released by the hackers.
Well, it may also be that these cyber criminals come to understand that the UK is a place to avoid, not a place to target.
Yeah. No, listen, it's difficult, but there'll be short-term costs, I guess, to get to that long-term goal. Just to circle back, you mentioned Russia a lot. Is the source of some of these ransomware attacks China?
There's a range of different sources. Primarily, the major point of concern is around cyber criminals who are based in Russia. And we've seen a significant number of attacks coming from Russia. But the truth of the matter is that cyber criminals operate right around the country. We think that these measures will make a significant difference in seeking to prevent them from targeting organisations here in the UK.
Primarily Russia, secondarily China?
Well, there are a range of different countries.
Are China in the top 5?
There will be cyber criminals operating out of China, as there are Russia, as there will be a range of other countries. Fundamentally, this is about ensuring that they look at the UK and understand that we won't tolerate that kind of activity, that we are hardening up our defences, and we will put mechanisms in place to make it much more difficult for them to target organisations here in the UK.
So just balance up for me. I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. You were very positive about Rachel Reeves going to China.
Yeah.
You put that forward yourself at the start of this interview. China in the top 5 or so of being responsible for these ransomware attacks. Russia you treat completely differently. Sanctions, we don't even really trade with Russia. We're not meant to anymore. Balance that out for me. Explain how we can have that.
Well, fundamentally, the government wants to secure economic growth. That is underpinned by national security. I don't think that you can have one without the other. So in the case of China, of course it's right that we seek to have a prosperous economic trading relationship with them. And that's precisely why the Chancellor's been out in China over the course of the weekend. But at the same time, we need to ensure that we protect our national security. And whether it's China or Russia or any other country, we've got to ensure that we've got the appropriate protections in place. And in the context of cyber criminality, the measures that we're bringing forward today will mean that we are a much harder target to attacks from wherever they come.
And I guess this genuine query here, and it's a very difficult task being in government as you are, but it's sort of saying it's right to have an economic relationship with China, and Rachel Reeves to go. At the same time, would you not, as a security minister, meet your Chinese counterparts or trust them or engage with them?
I think it's entirely possible to have meaningful contact with regard to a trading relationship and at the same time have meaningful contact with regard to matters relating to national security. They are two sides of the same coin. You can't have economic growth without national security, and you can't have national security with economic growth. So we have a policy with regard to China. Of course, we want to engage as closely as we possibly can. Of course, we want to trade with them and deliver economic prosperity for our country. But at the same time, it's my job and the Home Secretary's job to ensure that we protect our country from a national security perspective and that we've got in place all of the appropriate protections, whether that is with regard to China or Russia or whoever it might be.
And then just finally, Dan, just wanted to talk about the grooming gangs and this talk of potential new national inquiry. Is it your understanding around the Cabinet table that from the perspective of the government that matter is now closed, or is it still an open discussion depending on what more information comes to light?
Well, fundamentally, the priority is to deliver justice for the victims and ensure that the perpetrators of these heinous crimes are brought to justice. We think that the best mechanism for doing that is locally led inquiries. And of course, we're getting on with implementing the findings of the J report. So this is a process that took 7 years, that cost significant amount of money. Our absolute priority in order to deliver for these victims is getting on and deliver the findings of that report. And that's what we're doing.
And at the Cabinet table, this is a case closed matter. There's no further inquiry coming.
Well, we always keep these things under the review, and the Prime Minister himself has said that nothing is off the table. But in the short term, the priority has to be deliver on the findings of the J report. That is the mechanism that we think will most effectively deliver justice for the victims, but ensure that we can target the perpetrators, whether those are individuals or criminal gangs who've committed these heinous crimes. That's got to be the priority in the short term.
Dan Jarvis, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.